Okay. Hello, Kako. Welcome to the third hearing for the Committee on Culture, Arts, and International Affairs. Today is February 17th. The time is 10:01 a.m. and we are convening in room 329. Today we have with us Vice Chair Lepresti, Rep Capella, Rep Har, and I believe we will have a few other reps joining us in a bit. Before we get started, I'm going to go over some brief housekeeping rules. First, there is a 2-minute time limit per testifier in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and your testimony is completed, and after your testimony is completed. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting your testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connection on the testifier's end. In the event of a catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Lastly, please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from the hearing without the ability to rejoin. With that, we're gonna get started with our agenda. So first item on our agenda is HB 228, which would create a holiday in remembrance of US Senator Daniel Inouye. Starting with the first testifier. We have just written testimony. We have one in support and a few in support and a few in opposition. We don't have any testifiers planning to testify via Zoom. So with that, members, if we have any questions? Seeing none. Okay, with that being said, could pause just for a second. Okay, so for HB 229, we have only written testimony. We have individuals all in support and one offering comments. Do we have any questions from any members of the committee? Seeing none, we're gonna breeze right through this agenda. HB 1308 relating to Juneteenth. First testifier, we have on Zoom, we have Michael Goloyu. Are you here? Okay. Seeing he's not here, we're gonna move on to the next testifier who has informed us that they will be present, and that is Common Cause Hawaii, Sandy Ma.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Common Cause supports HB 1308. This is an excellent way to remember the true end of slavery in the United States. It wasn't the Emancipation Proclamation. It wasn't the end of the Civil War. Slavery continued afterwards. It wasn't until the Union troops reached the westernmost Confederate state and notified the slaves there that they were freed, that slavery officially ended. We're still trying to live down the sins of the past and move on and build a better nation together. And it's not going to happen overnight, but we could certainly recognize the sins of the past. So thank you very much for introducing this important measure.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Next, we have Catherine from Young Progressive Demanding Action. Okay, we do not see her on yet. We have Samantha Nealand in support. Are you here to testify?
Oh, hi, yes, thank you.
Aloha.
Mahalo, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Samantha Nealand. I am Miss Hawaii USA 2020 and the founder of the coalition Hawaii for Juneteenth. As the first ever African-American Miss Hawaii USA, I unfortunately know from personal experiences that while racism may not be as aggressively apparent in Hawaii as it is in other parts of the country, it does exist. It is my belief and the belief of everyone at Hawaii for Juneteenth that officially recognizing June 19th as a day of remembrance in Hawaii will serve to better educate Hawaii's diverse community on a monumental event in US history. Battling systemic racism first begins with a fundamental knowledge of our nation's racist history and how it has contributed to the white supremacist framework we see today. Providing the residents of Hawaii with an accurate telling of history will not only educate them, it will equip them with the necessary information needed to challenge inequality and move towards a more inclusive society. I ask all of you today to honor the Aloha spirit and take this much needed step towards ending racial disparity in Hawaii. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you for spearheading this legislation and your advocacy, as well as representing us on the national stage. Mahalo. Next up, I think that would be all that has submitted to participate in the Zoom today. We do have a lot of support from so many individuals, as well as City Council, Planned Parenthood, Hawaii Art Alliance, and so much organizations who have submitted testimony in support of this legislation. Do we have anyone else wishing to testify on this legislation on HB 1308? Okay. All right. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you, Representative. Good morning, everyone. Michael Galoyu on behalf of the LGBT Caucus. We want to stand in solidarity and support of having Juneteenth recognized as a day of remembrance. So we encourage you to pass this bill out and support it till passage. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you for joining us. Okay, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to HB 760. Thank you to all the testifiers for 1308. And first we have DBED, Georgia Skinner.
Aloha, Georgia Skinner, Head of Creative Industries Division at the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism. Thank you very much for allowing us to testify today. Great to see you, Chair, and the committee. On behalf of our team and the efforts that we put forth, I just want to bring to your attention that the intent of what I understand this measure to be is important. We have offered comments, we'll stand on those. But did want to point out two really important areas. One is that the performing arts community in the state of Hawaii, as well as our musicians, hula practitioners, have been adversely impacted, and so much so disproportionately to other support that has been received. So seeing that there's an expansion to include performing arts in this measure is encouraging. At the same time, the language regarding the videotaping and rights ownership of those performances by the state is direct in conflict with several laws, as well as the issues regarding intellectual property rights for our musicians and our artists. Creative Industries fights to advocate for our artists in this way and have been working with Senator Kirono's office and the Mechanical Licensing Coalition. So we have really great concerns about that section of the measure and ask that that be looked at carefully, and happy to work with the committee and finance to fix that area. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have State Foundation on Culture and Arts. We have Jonathan Johnson.
Aloha Chair Gates, Vice Chair Lopresti, and members of the committee. I'm Jonathan Johnson, Executive Director of the State Foundation on Culture and the Arts. We stand on our testimony with comments on HB 760. SFCA supports an appropriation of funding for performing arts, but we have concerns. The bill will compromise funding to cultural, educational, humanities, and visual arts programs, and concerns regarding the requirement for the presentation to be documented, and also over some of the copyright issues shared by Georgia. I'll be happy to answer questions after.
Mahalo. We appreciate you being here today. Next up, we have the Attorney General Randall Nishiyama.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Deputy Attorney General Randall Nishiyama. We have provided our written comments and are available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And I think that is all the testifiers we have who will be joining us via Zoom. Do we have anyone else on here wishing to provide testimony? Okay. Questions, members?
Chair, I had a question.
Vice Chair, go ahead.
Thank you. For Attorney General.
Yes.
Hi. Is there language that you guys suggest to fix the documentation and keeping recordings in your testimony?
We will work with DBED to provide that language.
Okay. Questions for John Johnson?
Sure.
Hi. So I've long supported seeing more money going to the performing arts, and I think this is a creative way to do it. I mean, it doesn't say how much is going to go one way or the other, right? I just wanted to get your feedback about, you think it'll, I think you said compromise the cultural ones. I mean, wouldn't you be able to say it might actually enhance the cultural programs by allowing for different artistic expressions and avenues for artistic expression?
Okay, there's a variety of concerns. One is, if this bill replaces the general fund appropriation, over half of the work that State Foundation does is in the cultural side. So there's a perspective that, oh, you're expanding and now allowing all your work to be incorporated into the special fund. We actually need a lot of our work to be done through general fund. So that appropriation is really important. If the Works of Art Special Fund is to support both visual and performing arts, the bill's going to be cut of visual arts unless the appropriation ceiling is raised, right? Because each year we get a certain amount of money, about $4 million, right? And we're spending most of that already. So we're going to have to reduce the spending to the visual arts. The big challenge is that this year to date, we've received $15,000 of income, okay? So 2 years ago, the CIP law was changed and the appropriation is a lump sum. So now we're not getting the money that we used to get. So we're talking about, we have what, 9 million in the bank now in the special fund. That's 2 years of operating and we're done. So if we don't change that income stream, everything's going to actually change. We're a three-legged stool. We have federal, state, and special funds. If you take out part of any of those, it's going to change how we adjust and shift. It will impact the work we do, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So I have anyone else have any questions on this bill?
No, it's okay.
You sure? Okay. JJ, just a quick follow-up on the 15,000. So I know in the table you provided us, it says as of 1/31/21. So is that all you're expecting up to July? The end of the fiscal year?
That's what we've received to date, and it's super alarming. And we really need to get that changed. Otherwise, all of our talk here today is going to be for naught. Yeah, we are expecting no more than that, unless things change.
And what needs to change for you to expect more?
Specifically, either we amend the 1% language to accommodate that. Randall's made that suggestion before, to accommodate the change in way that the CIP budget bill is written, is one way. So either the CIP budget bill outlines the construction appropriation separately from design and land acquisition, or we amend the 1% law to adjust to the way that the law is written, the CIP bill is written now. Is that right, Randall? Those two ways?
Yes, that's correct.
Or include a third way, which is a paragraph in the CIP bill that says, hey, make sure you generate your 1%. You know, that's basically a third way that it could be done.
Okay.
Chair, I had a follow-up question.
Go ahead, Vice Chair.
So I wasn't here 2 years ago. I was only gone 2 years, and it sounds like this changed radically. What was the change? Sorry, I don't know.
Sure.
What was
So in the budget bill, in the past, construction appropriation, renovation, design, land acquisition were all itemized in the state CIP budget. And then the theory was that, hey, put it all together into one lump and then let the department sort it out later. The Department of Budget and Finance interpreted that as not having the correct language to generate the 1%. So we're seeing that backlash now. Comptroller has written a memorandum to all the departments saying, hey, we're going to follow the 1%. That was just a consequence of that legislation. It wasn't intentional, but still we haven't seen the revenue come in. And,
so it was
Randall
Budget
actually
and
knows a lot.
Finance's interpretation of that change of the law and how they would distribute the funds is what you're saying.
Correct. And so we haven't seen any
Gotcha. Sorry.
A15s. Yeah.
I'm still playing catch up. I didn't think I'd missed that much 2 years out, but thank you.
JJ, I have a follow-up question on that piece of legislation. So is it not possible for you folks to request a breakdown of that funding that these departments are receiving and how they're breaking it down once they get that lump sum, as far as the design and construction and other necessary items?
That's our next strategy, is to approach each department with the budget bill as to what they got and check in and say, hey, have the comptroller's office do that, working with us. Looks like Randall's chomping at the bit. He knows a lot about this.
Yes, the comptroller's memorandum essentially says that each department shall break out the construction cost elements for a project so that they can compute the 1%.
But that's not happening right now.
That's not happening right now.
Okay. So it'd be more so administration side more than legislation side, it sounds like.
Well, there are two alternatives. One, if the legislature broke out the construction cost element, that would take care of the issue. And if it didn't, then it would have to be handled administratively.
Okay. That's clear enough for me. Okay. Any other questions from members? Okay. Thank you guys for the fruitful discussion. I think we're looking forward to engaging moving forward. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, HB 777. First up, we have Stephen Keene from the Hawaii State Art Museum. Actually, we have John Johnson, State Foundation on Culture and Art. Sorry about that, JJ.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Aloha, Chair Gates and members of the committee. The State Foundation stands on its testimony in opposition because this bill represents a cut to government support of the arts, which is essential to ensure that all people, regardless of their economic status or geographic location, have access to the arts. I'll be happy to answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next up, we have Maja Grosky from Donkey Mill Art Center. I might have butchered your last name, so if you want to repeat it again, go ahead.
Very much for this opportunity to testify before the committee. I am the executive director of the Donkey Mill Art Center in Holualoa on the island of Hawaii. We're just about 20 minutes north of Kona, and we are a rural community. And the Donkey Mill Center board and staff do not support HB 777, as it would severely impact not only the ability of the State Foundation to continue its many programs statewide that benefit so many communities, but also supporting vital institutions like ours that deliver rare art education opportunities for rural communities. So the proposed cuts of HB 777 combined with the current lack of grant and aid funding are a double threat to our ability to serve our community. The Donkey Mill Art Center and our community of artists are supported by several State Foundation programs. The biennium grants make it possible for us to bring art exhibitions of local and visiting artists to our rural community and their families struggling to find a sense of continuity in this disruptive time of the pandemic. The arts are integral to the well-being of all communities. The impact of COVID-19 has made this all the more starkly clear. The State Foundation funding is one of our last lifelines for arts education in this state. And the arts mean business for the state of Hawaii. The Hawaii contemporary art scene is increasingly gaining national and international recognition and is a growing economic sector. So this bill would ultimately be a huge step backward and further maim the state's economy. By cutting, potentially cutting over 50% of revenue for the Works of Art Special Fund, we deem this unacceptable for a state that prides itself on the rich history and talent of its diverse community. The survival of our sense of community identity are throughout history to present day subject to attack, commodification, and being silenced. Please do not mute the voices of our vibrant arts community. The repercussions of HB 77 would cause long-term damage to Hawaii's reputation and ability to preserve our unique identity. I understand and so appreciate that our legislators face many, many difficult decisions at this time. And I thank you for your hard work and commitment to represent and serve the people of Hawaii. And thank you for hearing me this morning. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thank you for providing your testimony. We're gonna move on to John Parkinson. Are you here? Okay, if you are here, we'll move on to the next and you can notify us. Next testifier, we have Sesuko Morinoi, individual here to testify. Okay, not present. Next, we have Eileen Nani. Not present either. Okay, we're gonna move down the list. And I think that would be all the testifiers who have indicated they will be testifying via Zoom today. Do we have any other testifiers here with us on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Any questions, members?
Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Rep. Capella.
My question is for Maya from Donkey Mill.
Hello, yes.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for everything that the Donkey Mill Art Center has done and continues to do. I think there are many issues with this bill. It's literally a direct attack and a direct cut to arts and arts education. And I would really love if you could kind of illuminate specifically on what Donkey Mill has done with your students. I know that you go into schools and you talk about, there's just different projects that you've done, but you've also, in my community specifically, you've really kept going even through the pandemic. And I think that has been something that's really been a bright spot for so many youth. So I was wondering if you could just expand a little bit and enlighten the members on some of the different things that you folks have done throughout the pandemic to keep the arts alive and why it's so important that we have organizations like Donkey Mill and we continue to fund these organizations.
Thank you. Great question. And well, I feel that our ability to respond to the pandemic is living proof of the power of arts education. Our team did not miss a beat in shifting and re-envisioning and adapting our programs to the many different limitations that were caused by the pandemic. So this meant a combination of switching to digital delivery of programs, providing art kits to still have that hands-on experience at home. We were very quick to open up our doors with socially distanced programs. We have been in area schools, including Hulualoa Elementary, and for a good 17 years. And we have teaching artists go directly into the classroom. We also have long-running after-school programs. And we have additional programs for adults with developmental disabilities with partner institutions like Full Life Hawaii. And we have many programs that bring kupuna into the aspect of being teachers and really strengthening community ties. So everything from face mask projects and really being a source of a continuing safe gathering place, be it in the physical space or virtual space. We are very, very tied to our community, and there is much more of an emphasis these days since our new strategic plan to reach underserved and under-resourced communities. So for example, an exhibit we had that featured some woven baskets by a Marshallese community led to bringing Marshallese community members to our roster of teaching artists and are now leading workshops in weaving. So we are, literally, building community, weaving community, and those bonds are strengthened through the arts and culture.
Sure, one more question, if I may.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Continuing on with that and all the wonderful work that you folks do you, from the kupuna that you bring in to people that haven't maybe had the opportunity to work in the arts but are wanting to, like the Marshallese women that you just mentioned, to the students that you talk to in the elementary schools surrounding Donkey Mill Art Center, to the classes that you folks teach, how many people do you folks impact? Do you have a number?
Oh gosh, I didn't have the statistics right in front of me, but I can, let's see, I definitely in the hundreds. I mean, our mailing list alone is close to 4,000. And we have been a steady presence in the community. Last year was our 25th anniversary. And so our list of partners keeps going. If there's a chance for me to provide you exact statistics after the fact, I can certainly give you a lot more detail.
Thank you. I more so wanted to ask that question because I think it's really important that, especially in rural communities, we have places that are a stronghold. And I think the arts can truly provide that. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask that question. But I know that my family and my younger siblings have definitely been impacted by Donkey Mill Art Center. And one of the reasons why we need to make sure that we continue to fund the arts and not take money away from them. So thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Capella. Any other questions from members? I have a couple questions for Don Johnson. So how much funding is drawn down from renovations as of right now?
So we estimate, looking back, it's about 55% of the appropriation every year when we receive funds. So it's approximately, you can think of it as like $2.5 million on an average year. And if you were to apply that 2.5 million back into the outstanding backlog of renovation projects, which is like a $200 million R&M budget, you wouldn't notice the missing 2.5 million. But if you take that 2.5 million out of what we're doing, you would have a huge impact on the community. I think one place to look is, if you looked at the table 14 that you guys get in our budget, State Foundation has hundreds of contracts that are like 8,000, 15,000 that go out, whereas most everybody else, other departments, you know, they do a few contracts, but we put all that money back into the community in small amounts. And if you just kept it in the R&M budget, it would go to contractors, and you would never see that tiny little 2.5 million out of what, a $200 million R&M budget.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question on this. So does FCA commission or install art a part of these renovations? So when a renovation is done, a part of a state building, is that a part of the agreement when this renovation is completed? SFCA will contribute art in this place?
Sure, great question. So what happens is the funds from all the renovations, they often come as lump sums or specific buildings. They come to the Works of Art Special Fund, and then departments, we work with them to prioritize where the work will be done. So for example, we just recently completed a major work of art at Pukalani Elementary School, right? Which was built like before the state was a state, right? But it allows us to, yes, go back into older structures. We can fund a lot of the work of the Hawaii State Art Museum comes through that source. But yes, we actually go back into older buildings and do work and rotating our collection, right? So you're most familiar with the art that goes on walls, right? And everyone wants to see something contemporary and new. That actually goes back in. For example, Capitol, right? There's 500 some works of art by local artists in that building, but the building was really old, but it continues to generate revenue through Works of Art Special Fund and renovation.
Got it. Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for now. Any other questions from members? Seeing none, thank you folks for being here to testify. We're gonna move on to our next agenda item, HB 1083. We have two testifiers who have signed up to testify on this measure. First, we have ACLU of Hawaii, Mandy Fernandez. No, she's not present. Okay. We're gonna move on to our next testifier, Laulani Te'il.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha. Mahalo nui loa for this opportunity to testify on this measure. First of all, I'd like to really thank the committee for this time that you have provided. And I would really like to thank all of the introducers of this measure who put it together. I will say that it is nice for a change to be testifying in support of a measure relating to the houseless in Hawaii. As you know, Kanawai Mamalahoi, the law of the splintered paddle, is Hawaii's first law. That law has never been repealed. It is still our #1 law. And for those who still identify very strongly with the Hawaiian Kingdom, it is the law of the land. For those who respect the state, it is in the Constitution of the state of Hawaii. It has been a matter of a lot of discussion in the time that I have worked with the houseless folks and their human rights and civil rights. Often it has been dismissed, honestly, and I commend the lawmakers who have brought this forward to actually speak to this law as a real thing. You know, it is the Constitution says that it is enshrined within the Constitution of the state of Hawaii. I want to emphasize that enshrinement should not be a burial mount. You know, it should not be an edifice that encapsulates it for dismissal. And this is the first time where human rights that are internationally protected are actually recognized in accordance with our laws that have been in existence for many hundreds of years here in Hawaii. So with that, the protection of human rights is tantamount before any other solutions can be effectively built for the issues surrounding houselessness and surrounding public use of spaces. So I commend that effort, and I ask that you please support this measure. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Okay, that was, I believe, the only testifier on the list. Okay. Yep. Okay, any questions, members? Okay. Seeing none, thank you for the testifiers joining us today. We're going to move on to HB 242. We don't have any testifiers listed for Zoom. Is there anyone on here wishing to testify on HB 242?
Representative Michael Galoyu for the LGBT Caucus.
Hello, Michael. Go ahead.
The LGBT Caucus unfortunately has to oppose this bill in its current form. We think it dilutes the message of Dr. King. He and the service he's done for our country. That this bill would be better well said if we're going to be asking for people to consider things locally, to carve out a day, say August 1st for the Hilo massacre, when we saw the local people stand up for union rights and they were met with violence by our police force. If we're going to ask people how to feel and how they would feel when it comes to I think that this would be a better way to service this, if we're going to ask people to think locally and how the kings and queens would feel if they came back to Hawaii, and using this as a day of remembrance to get people to pay attention to local things. So that Dr. King's vision is yet to be happen. His dream is yet to have come to fruition, and that we should not be diminishing the work he's done by cumbersomely adding this to the end of what has already been recognized as a day of remembrance for Dr. King and his strife and his struggle. So on that note, we thank you for hearing our testimony, and we hope that you will hold this bill, send it back to the introducers, and ask them to come back with a better, more logical, and more encompassing thing to take in. So thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. Okay, seeing no more testifiers, we're going to move on to our next agenda item, HB 1193. First up, we have Department of Accounting and General Services. We have Kurt with us today.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Although I'm not with DAGS, I'm with DLNR and Division of State Parks, but I'm assuming DAGS may want to participate as well. I really appreciate this opportunity.
We do.
Okay.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. I am Dr. Adam Jansen, and I have the honor of serving as State Archivist, and I'm here representing Comptroller Otaguro. I appreciate you hearing this bill. For those of you who have not been to the archives, we were legislatively founded in 1905, and the Kana'ina building, which is on Palace grounds, was built as the archival facility. We outgrew that by 1930, so the extension off the back was added because there are so much records being produced of permanent value that it's a constant part of being a functioning government. The facility we are in currently was built in 1954 because we had outgrown all the space we had. So here we are 70 years later. We are at 94, 95% capacity. So if we don't start the process of starting to plan on the and then what, we're going to be out of room, which means we cannot preserve the documentary heritage.
We have from the Friends of Iolani Palace, Paula Akana.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm the Executive Director of the Friends of Iolani Palace, and we stand in firm support of House Bill 1193. And we have the long-term lease, a 25-year lease with the Department of Land and Natural Resources for the Palace, the Barracks, the Coronation Pavilion, and Kana'ina, the old government building. And all of these buildings have issues and problems, and our revenues stopped when COVID hit. And right now we're running at a deficit of between $60,000 and $100,000 every month. We're just doing the basic maintenance. And even the maintenance is $20,000 a month just to do that. So this would help us seriously. Kurt had talked about the roof. The roof's been leaking for years on people and on objects. We are applying for the Saving America's Treasures grant with a DLNR match to try to work on that. If we don't get the grant, we're really worried. If we do get the grant, once you take some of that slate aside, we have no idea what they're going to find under it. Previous projects on the barracks, that roof, which is a much smaller roof line, went nearly $170,000 over budget once they took up the slate and saw what was under it. So, it's an old building. All of the buildings, Kana'ina, our doors, you can see right through them from the outside. There's just a lot of work that needs to be done. I might want to add, which wasn't in my testimony, is that we tried to do a Zoom with our 7 staff members so we wouldn't be together in the same room, and we're unable to Zoom because the bandwidth is so poor on the property. So we had Spectrum come out and look, and they gave us a rough estimate of $300,000 to put in new lines just to get us up to speed where we could actually do things more virtual, which is what we want to do with schools and groups and so forth. And so there are just a lot of issues, with an old place, with an old home that was never really meant to be a museum per se. So this bill would give us that opportunity to just start to eat away at some of those issues and make things better. So thank you so much for your consideration. I stand to any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Questions? Okay. I have a question for Kurt Cottrell.
Shoot.
Kurt, you're representing State Parks, DLNR?
Correct.
Okay. So I don't think a lot of people know, but Friends of Iolani Palace is kind of just the operation side of it, but the ownership falls on the state. Is that correct?
It does. And I've explained this a few times, but it's a complicated relationship. So in a nutshell, as Paula said, the Kana'ina building, the palace itself, the barracks, the Coronation Pavilion are all subject to the lease with DLNR, and they're the custodial responsibility is, generate enough revenue in order to do the, pay for maintenance and operations of these sites. The Department of Accounting and General Services, they do the physical management of the grounds itself. So that includes the parking areas, and then the lawns and the trees is under the purview of DAGS, which has a memorandum with DLNR. State Parks' role is purely in a regulatory fashion, in that our administrative rules apply to the 4 quadrants. And so our functionality really is to coordinate with the Friends, ensuring that any special uses or above and beyond normal day-to-day use that are authorized by permit, that we coordinate with the Friends, and vice versa. When they have their events that are their primary fundraising events to cover their management, they run those permit requests through State Parks. So in a nutshell, and then the archives, as Adam indicated, they're kind of there off to the side, fulfilling their function of, the storage and management of all those historic documents and antiquities that fall under the purview of the archives building. So it's a square with a lot of kuleana and busy activity. And, as Paula said, I really feel for them. Just as State Parks has taken a huge hit on our income due to COVID, I know the Palace is really struggling, right now, in terms of just making their nut for their utilities and salaries and whatnot during this challenging time. Does that kind of fill you in, Cedric?
Yeah, I have some follow-up questions. I don't want to take too long though. I had a follow-up question regarding jurisdiction. So with all of these pieces kind of all needing to come together to create this perfect environment where things function correctly, has there been consideration for consolidation in terms of what can be done to streamline processes? For example, I did speak with Mrs. Akana recently, and we discussed their budget regarding security and how security makes up 40% of their personnel costs. But we also have care enforcement officers charged with dealing with enforcing the laws on the property. So, I feel like there's somewhat of duplication happening with security. And I know, as you know, Kurt, we work in my district with care to deal with community issues. But is there, in your eyes, ways that, say, care could possibly fill in for that 40% cost of the security Friends of Iolani is forced to pay to secure the palace?
Another additive is the sheriff's office also can do law enforcement as well. It's not just limited to care. Typically, care only engages when we have permitted events where we have concern that due to the size or the nature of the event that law enforcement is necessary. But to have a dedicated care presence at the Palace, I think, is completely untenable right now, given how thin their officer law enforcement staff is throughout the island of Oahu. And to be honest, if I could dedicate law enforcement at certain other areas, such as, some areas in your community, Rep Gates, that would be, I think, more effective. But so to answer the law enforcement, I think the general answer is no. I don't think there would be any really way without sacrificing law enforcement, as thin as it is in other areas. In regards to the complexity, there was a bill 2 sessions ago. COVID obviously derailed everything, but State Parks was keenly interested in subsuming the management of the grounds from DAGS, but it's really incumbent upon getting additional funds. We would be interested in removing a lot of the parking from the Palace grounds, getting rid of the ugly parking meters, re-asphalting it, and making it all black. Historically, all around the Palace, it was all black cinders. So just redoing it with black asphalt would be a pretty good historical readaptation. And then with there was a permanent groundskeeper associated with that measure, and State Parks would be able to handle the management and maintenance of the grounds in addition to the regulatory elements, but only on the caveat with that additional support. Yeah, and then we would amend our agreement with DAGS to really, exclude, their Kuleana from that. And they're, as I understand it, talking to Brian and the comptroller, they would be very interested in having us, pick that up. But again, not without, the additional manpower and some other funds to gussy it up, to make it better. Because it really bothers me to see those orange traffic cones around the exterior of the palace. It really diminishes the sanctity and value of Iolani Palace to have this amazing, building facade and then those orange cones because we have cars driving.
Okay. So I have one final question. So from my understanding, Friends of Iolani Palace is charged with funding renovations, maintenance, and repair of Iolani Palace. Is that correct?
To me or Paula?
You.
Okay, we cover all the CIP, the heavy lifting on the R&M, and then the Friends cover more of the day-to-day R&M. That pretty much sums it up. Yeah, Paula?
Yeah, pretty much. I think before I came up on board, there wasn't a sharing of actually what heavy duty R&M was needed. Kurt, I mean, you guys didn't know the roof was leaking. You guys weren't aware of the bees infestation and so forth. And so we were really fortunate to have Hawaii Tourism Authority step in to do the bees and the Coronation Pavilion, which was a big, that could have been a big health hazard if somebody had stepped into the Coronation Pavilion and had it collapse. So we're really happy on that. So DLNR hasn't been asked in recent years to do any of the heavy lifting because for some reason it wasn't something that was shared with them. But yeah, they're to do like the roof, anything heavy duty to do with plumbing. Previous to me coming in, we just worked that into that present GIA that we have. So a lot of the big R&M, the Friends just worked that into some of the GIAs that we had, the roofing at the barracks and so forth. But even with that, we ended up paying about $170,000 over that came out of our ops because the roofing was more than we thought it was. But I think now we talk all the time. Kurt and I and Alan talk all the time and share information about, what's hurting, and I'm really open and transparent about everything that's broken.
Well, thank you for that. And okay, I have one more clarifying question. So in terms of funding these repairs, would this be listed under DAG, State Park, or to Iolani Palace? For example, the roof.
Rep Gates, all of that would fall, would be a CIP appropriation to state parks that we would throw into the mix of our other CIPs and basically, program it out, go out to bid, do the solicitations, and then oversee the repair. Yeah, so it would, the CIP would all come to us. Like the last big one we did is we replaced the fence, which hadn't been redone in over 112 years. And I forget the cost of that, but it was 1 point some other big number million to re-galvanize and dip all of the, there's a term for it. Anyway, the spears and the posts, those were all completely redone, and that was our CIP project.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have. Members, any other questions?
Chair, I had some questions.
Okay, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Akana and Mr. Cottrell, I'm really curious about what private entities have stepped up to help. I mean, Kamehameha Schools Bishop of State, last I checked, is $11 billion more than the combined endowment of Harvard and Yale. We, the state, are in a position where we're having trouble paying out unemployment insurance. As much as I value the Iolani Palace and everything you do, and I congratulate you on your hard work and thank you. Where's the private wealth right now? Are they stepping up to the plate or not? Because now's the time.
Vice Chair, we've started having Ali'i Trust meetings with Kamehameha Schools, Lili'o Kalani Trust, Lunalilo Home, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and so forth, to start talking about what can be done. I think the concern has been that it is a state-owned property and they don't want to be holding the ball for all of it. So we have been talking about looking at what is the operating cost and the needs. One will give X amount, one will get, and so forth. That's just kind of started. I can tell you funding that we've received since the pandemic hit. The Council for Native Hawaiian Affairs was phenomenal in doing a fundraising for us for $80,000. They also offered us a loan, which we didn't need to go to because we had better terms with the SBA loan. Hawaii Community Foundation, we received some money from them. We received an anonymous donation from a donor fund in Ohio for $100,000 that helped us immensely. That helped us put us 1 month forward. But it really has been the community, outpouring of support from the community and helping us. I will be really frank. There's one, and I won't go into who they are, but there's one big foundation here in Hawaii that we applied for funding, and they basically said, we love the palace, but if the state doesn't step up, we're not going to. And so it's kind of frustrating because we're kind of stuck in the middle of everything. But we have.
That's where I'm a little confused, because Mr. Cottrell, maybe you can help clarify, because you were explaining the kind of complicated dynamic. So it's a state-owned building, but the trust, or I don't want to get the names wrong, Ms. Akana, the organization you're in charge of, part of the lease is an expectation of maintenance. But I mean, does that go as far as saying replacing the roof? I mean, I don't know that that's.
It doesn't. The actual lease does say that the roof belongs to DLNR, to anything.
Okay, see, that's an important detail, right? That is on us then. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we applied for the Saving America's Treasures grant because it does provide up to $500,000 with a match. And so DLNR was willing to match. And that, my feeling is that makes the state money go way longer if we can do that. And so we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. Mr. Cottrell, you want to add anything to help me? I think I'm getting a better grip on this.
I appreciate your question, and I like the direction this is going, but Paula pretty much summed it up. And more importantly, under her leadership, compared to previous, there's a lot more disclosure and communication, and most importantly, collaboration, like having HTA and DLNR and the Friends discuss, creative ways to restore the Coronation Pavilion and help with the bee issue. But in this day and age, and I think Paul is doing an excellent job, we have to diversify any method there is to restore and manage and maintain the palace. But their lease gives them a lot of flexibility. And when we navigate out of COVID, pre-COVID, based on their tours and their special events and some additional donors that come and go, they were in a pretty good financial situation for all of their reoccurring costs. But that R&M, just as us at State Parks, it just kind of keeps accumulating until it reaches a CIP threshold, basically. And unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes throughout the state, where due to lack of R&M, it eventually balloons into a CIP.
And thank you. Well, I'll just close with Ms. Kana. If we do in the legislature, and I say this with full recognition of the responsibility the legislature has for helping to maintain the property, but if the legislature bends over backwards to get funds this year in this environment to you guys, you better go to that agency and tell them time to step up then. And if they give you any guff, you send them to me. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I want to thank the testifiers for joining us today, and we will be having decision making to follow. We have our final bill, HB 627. We did have one testifier, but they are unfortunately unable to make it. And so we do not have any testifiers via Zoom. Is there anyone wishing to testify on HB 627? Okay, seeing none. Any questions, members? Seeing none. Okay, we're gonna recess for decision making at 11:30. Recess. Okay. Reconvening for decision making on our 10 a.m. agenda for the Committee on Culture, Arts, and International Affairs. The time is 11:32, and we are in room 329. Okay, so members, first agenda item, HB 228. Members, we received feedback from the Daniel K. Inouye Institute, and they expressed that they recognize that there are other pressing issues before the legislature at the moment, as well as our COVID pandemic. And so they request that we defer this measure for next session, potentially. So the recommendation is to defer. Okay, moving on to HB 229, relating to United States Senator Daniel K. Akaka. There is an obvious issue with creating a holiday for him on September 11th, which is the senator's birthday. So we are going to move out a HD1, changing the date to January 4th, which is the day the senator was first inaugurated into the House of Representatives. We will also be defecting the date and adding in language to honor his service, not just to the state, but also to our nation. We have any questions, members? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 229, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair.
Aye.
Vice Chair Lopresti.
Aye.
Rep Har.
Aye.
Rep Capella.
Aye.
Rep Nishimoto. Rep Tam votes aye. Rep Yamane.
Aye.
And Rep Ward is excused. Chair recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to HB 1308 relating to Juneteenth Day. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as an HD1, defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. I want to thank the author as well as the advocates for their advocacy on this measure and to recognize Juneteenth Day here in Hawaii. With that, any questions, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1308, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Noting the excused absence of Rep Ward, who will be excused for the rest of the agenda. Anyone with reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on to HB 760 relating to the State Foundation on Culture and Arts. After lengthy discussions with both advocates as well as FCA, as well as the AG, my recommendation is that we move this bill out as an HD1 with technical amendments, also adopting the amendments of the AG's office, as well as defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. I think this bill prompts a good discussion that I would like to see continue through this legislative session. And so the recommendation is going to be, again, to pass out as a HD1. Do we have any questions from members? Okay, seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 670, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations?
Reservations.
Rep Capella votes with reservations.
Reservations.
Vice Chair Lopresti votes with reservations. Any noes? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, HB 777 relating to the Work of Art Special Fund. After discussions with the author as well as State Foundation on Culture Arts, we are going to move this out as a HD1. The first thing we're going to do is restore the language that allows for the State Foundation on Cultural Arts to receive funding through renovations of capital improvement projects. The next thing we'll do is defect the date to July 1st, 2065. We will be adding an amendment to fund the Hawaii State Museum of Natural and Cultural History, also known as Bishop Museum. And we also add in a line to help fund the Hawaii State Museum of Monarchy History, also known as Iolani Palace, through the Work of Art Special Fund, giving them the critical support they need for renovations, which would fall under the funding mechanism for the Work of Art Special Fund. We will also add in a sunset date of June 30th, 2022. And if I didn't say it, we will be defecting the dates and adding in technical amendments. Any discussion on HB 777?
Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Bella.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate what the chair is trying to do and the many ways he's trying to assist. However, districts like my own and organizations like Donkey Mill Art Center, which is incredibly important to my community, will be extremely impacted by these cuts. So with that, Chair, respectfully, I have to vote no.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Chair, I want to go reservations, please.
Okay, Vice Chair, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Chair, I'll also be going with reservations.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 777, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone with reservations? Rep. Lopresti votes reservations, Rep. Tam votes reservation. Anyone else? Any other no's other than Rep. Capella? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to HB 1083 relating to the law of the splinter paddle. As well-intentioned as this bill is, after discussing this legislation with service providers in the communities that we represent, there has been major concerns over the unintended consequences of this measure. And Chair's recommendation is going to be to defer this for further discussion. I do want to thank the author of this bill and the advocates for really standing up to showcase their support for this bill. But as we know, we also need to be able to provide wraparound services for those in need, as well as to increase our housing and shelter stock and the shortage that we are currently experiencing right now. We also need more input from cultural practitioners, as well as the broad nature of this bill dealing with private property and rights of access. So again, I'm gonna work with the author to find a way forward to make sure that we can codify this measure. So with that, we're gonna move on to HB 242. I also wanna thank the author of this bill for its good intentions and the discussions that it has prompted. However, after discussing this bill with advocates in the community, as well as those that have fought hard for the recognition of MLK Day in Hawaii, they have expressed deep concerns for, again, unintended consequences of this bill and somewhat of the distractions that this bill will cause to MLK Day and the Reverend King's legacy. So we will be deferring this measure for further discussion. Okay, HB 1193 relating to CIP projects. Both Iolani Palace as well as the State Archives are irreplaceable parts of the legacy, history, culture, and identity of these islands. And I recommend passing this bill, HB 1193, as an HD1 with the amounts and items requested in the committee report for consideration by the Finance Committee. Do we have any questions by members? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1193, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Okay, members, last item on the agenda, HB 627 relating to special license plate. The Hokulea's voyage is also an irreplaceable part of our island's history, legacy, and identity, and a trailblazer for the mission of our own committee. I recommend moving this out as a HD1 with technical amendments, and by removing the limitation that this only applies to electric vehicles in order to increase revenue and allow a greater amount of support for people to support PBS. Also, as we know, low income to moderate income residents are unable to afford electric vehicles a lot of times. So this would allow for our community across the board to be able to support PBS's mission, as well as to have a really nice Hokulea license plate. So with that, we will also be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. Do we have any questions from members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 627, Chair's recommendation is passed with amendments. Anyone with reservations? Any noes? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. And that adjourns our 10 a.m. Mahalo.